Hi, this is Tamsen Granger.
This is Dan Abuhoff.
With Tamsen and Dan, read the paper on January 13th. Sunday, January 13th,
Yes.
2019.
Yes, good.
And boy, are we pooped.
We're pooped because we just came back from a long weekend, a jazz weekend. That's right, you heard it here first.
Not that it was jazzy.
It was
a jazz
It
weekend.
was jazzy in its own way. It was a jazz weekend, I better explain. We were at Mohonk Mountain House. Tamsen frequents that even more than I do. Most recently was Sadie.
In New Paltz.
But this was different. Mohonk Mountain House is a fabulous destination. Some would call it a natural wonder. There's all kinds of fabulous things, but something even more fabulous this weekend. It was Jazz Weekend, sponsored by WBGO.
It was the WBGO Winter Jazz Festival.
There you go.
Music on the Mountain.
Right. And WBGO
Or Jazz on the Mountain? Jazz on the Mountain?
Jazz on the Mountain Weekend. And WBGO is the big jazz station that broadcasts out of Newark that some of us, namely I do, listen to semi-regularly. And it's probably as big a jazz station as you have in this area, in the New York area. And they're very good, and their lead DJ for a long time is a fellow named Michael Bourne. And he was the organizer, as he has been apparently for almost 20 years in a row, of the Jazz on the Mountain Weekend at Mohonk.
So he curates the selection of performers.
Right.
And as he says, he gets people he likes to hear and people he likes.
And you could see that. But let's set the stage for what happens, because, you know, it was kind of eye-opening for us. We've never done anything like this. We have never been to a music festival or a music cruise or anything like that. And so we just don't know what to expect. We're not the most sophisticated jazz listeners. We had looked at the program. We really weren't familiar with most of the performers on the program. So what to expect, we didn't know. And here's what we got. And it was...
There were like performances like every 10 minutes. It was crazy.
It was great. Here's what it was. They had a performance morning, midday, and evening. We got there Friday evening, so you started with an evening performance at 9 o'clock, and then 3 performances spread out on Saturday, and then we went to the morning and the afternoon on Sunday. So we got to see a total of 6 performances in a little less than 2 full days, really.
And there were more going on after we left.
Yeah, and yes, they're still going. So how did that work out? Was it too much jazz for you, Tamsen, who's not really a jazz fan?
Yes, it was too much jazz for me.
And the answer to that question is no. Tamsen loved it. Tamsen loved it. She was very enthusiastic. I think what she will tell you is, I'll give her a chance now, that she really enjoyed the jazz. Is that fair?
I enjoyed the music.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
And you know, we saw so many performances that we couldn't possibly tell you everyone we saw.
Talk about some of the performers.
Well, it was a real range, and they were all, I thought they were all great. There's a lot of jazz piano. A fellow named Michael Wolff on Friday night. We saw a woman named Helen Sung, who you thought was fantastic on
Helen
piano.
Sung.
Yes, on Monday. On Saturday. And she was in the morning of Saturday, and she was also Sunday morning. And hers is an interesting story. She's a first-generation Chinese woman. And she
grew up in Texas. She went to school in Texas. She was training to be a classical pianist.
That's what first generation is. Right. Yes. Right. Yeah.
Much to her parents' distress.
Right. Her parents came over from China. They moved to Houston. They thought their daughter would be a doctor.
And so she's training to be a classical pianist.
Right.
A friend takes her to hear Harry Connick Jr.
Right.
And he plays the piano, and she goes, wow, I didn't even know you could do that on a piano. And she ends up being in one of the first classes of, what's it called, the Thelonious Monk Institute.
Right, in the New York
part of
area.
the Boston Conservatory. And she's incredible.
Yes.
Because she plays jazz with the intensity and the skill of a classically trained pianist. She has unbelievable power for the little person she is. It was just...
Well, she was really...
It was heart-stopping.
She was heart-stopping. I think that's true. She was sort of the star, the young star. There weren't too many young stars of the concert series, and she was great. But everybody was great. You know, Saturday afternoon they had a fellow named Don Braden who plays tenor saxophone, who was fantastic, and he has a CD out that's relatively popular now, so I'll mention it, called Earth, Wind, and Wonder, in which there are performances of Earth, Wind, and Fire songs and also Stevie Wonder songs.
Jazz versions.
And they were
not
fantastic.
With people singing.
No, we didn't hear any singing.
No, it's just
until Saturday
instrumentals.
night.
Yeah.
Saturday night they had a break from jazz. They did the blues, and
they had a blues jam session.
And that was great too. And they featured Catherine Russell, who's a reasonably well-known blues and jazz singer. She's got a tremendously powerful voice. And Rob Paparozzi was the guy who led the group, and it was a lot of, it was Blues Brothers type stuff. And matter of fact, he leads something called the New Blues Brothers Band.
He sings with them,
yeah.
But he also sings with the current iteration of Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Turns out,
I wouldn't catch that. Yeah, I don't know.
And he plays the harmonica
unbelievably well.
Unbelievable. And he was really...
He did a version of She's Got a Ticket to Ride. He started with a John Lennon take on it, and he went, off from there. And it was roof raising.
It was on harmonica.
On harmonica.
The Beatles on harmonica.
And the great thing and the climax, maybe the high point of the weekend, was Saturday night, as they tend to do when they do blues and they get everybody together. When they get to the last song or so, they sing, Every Day I've Got the Blues. And everybody comes on stage, and there was a lot of cross pollination. So you had everybody. You had Don Braden come on stage.
Let's be clear. There was no pollination on stage.
Cross fertilization, whatever it was.
You're making it sound.
They all got together and sang together. Helen Sung was on the stage, and they were going crazy. They were jamming like crazy.
What a jam session is, Daniel.
That's why I had Tamsen with me, because she knows what a jam session is. She was whispering to me the whole time. They're jamming. So, now I know. And then Sunday, one final mention. Again, we've almost given too much detail. Scott Robinson, weirdest guy in the world. Scott Robinson Quartet. And he comes on with an odd hat, with an odd vest. He tells us that he made his own hat. He tells us his wife made the vest. And he
plays his first number is like super esoteric. Ready to hate this guy.
And then he turns it around, and he's very heartfelt. Heartfelt was the word that Michael Bourne used for him, and it was, I think, fairly accurate. He was very funny. He talked about his family in a very serious way, and he was soulful. And it was a wonderful jazz performance. Look, bottom line, we had a great time.
Yes. But what was fun? Part of what was fun about it was it was such a surprise.
Yeah.
We didn't know what we were
Everything
in for.
was new. We had no expectations.
It was all super.
Right.
And meanwhile, we got a lot of physical exercise.
Right.
We did some hiking in between musical sets.
Yeah.
And did some swimming and so forth. So it was quite the weekend.
Bottom line is, we're going next year. And anybody listening might consider going next year. We're going next year. It was fantastic. So,
but there will be no cross-pollination.
We came back to real life, which meant football, and had mixed results in the football pool. But, much as it's important to win or lose your football pool or football bet, sometimes the players have a bigger stake in it, strangely enough. And the big story last week was that the Bears got knocked out of the playoffs when they're playing the Eagles because their kicker, a fellow named Cody Parker, missed a 43-yard field goal.
Well, he didn't miss it.
Well, they're still debating that, but perhaps the defender got a finger on it and was partially blocked. But
the double doink.
It hit the goalpost twice, the upper side and the horizontal side. But the deal is that people in Chicago, there were some people acted badly. Some fans didn't take it well. They felt that the kicker failed them. They were criticizing him on Twitter or whatever electronic communications people use in Chicago. And there were those who came to his defense, including the Goose Island Beer Company. I have a Goose Island beer every once in a while, usually the IPA. That's what I think they market out here. And they decided to defend him by setting up a goalpost next to their brewery in Chicago. And they marked 43 yards from the goalpost. And they held an exhibition just this Saturday, just yesterday. I haven't heard about the results, in which everybody's allowed to try a 43-yard field goal, the field goal that was missed. and anybody who makes it gets a year's supply of Goose Island beer, which is an interesting proposition. And I guess Goose Island is betting that people can't make that 43-yard field goal, and we'll see. It seems to me there are a lot of people kicked in college who could be getting a lot of free beer here if they stop by Chicago. But, it's a nice way to make the point that it's not so easily done, and this poor guy doesn't deserve that much criticism. Is that fair enough, Tamsen?
I would say so.
Yes, good.
Meanwhile, yes, you didn't do very well in the poll. You've been, a little bit on the cranky side.
All right, I'll get over it.
All right, never mind. Moving right along here. Chrysler Building. It's for sale.
Right.
You know the Chrysler Building. It's that Art Deco delight in Midtown Manhattan.
It's nice to look at it from my office.
Gee, what a sight. But it turns out nobody wants to buy it. I mean, you can snap it up as a bargain, probably. And there are a couple of different problems with it. Numero uno, it's a landmark.
Yes.
It's got landmark status.
Right.
And again, we could go on our rant about how that, the preservation can ruin a building in addition to saving it. So they can't make any changes to keep it up to date with, modern technology, etc. So that is a real problem. And there was an article by Gina Belafonte in the New York Times speculating that the design itself was too old-fashioned, too many warrens of rooms, interior columns, and low ceilings, when today we're really looking for those wide-open spaces. And apparently one of the reasons you need wide-open spaces is because people may not behave themselves. And so we need transparency, not just
That's the problem.
theoretical transparency. Apparently we need transparency
it's an
in our
unsafe building.
architecture.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
Because we can't trust ourselves or whatever. But she mentions in her article that the future legacy of these buildings may be as collector items, more so than functioning architecture.
Who's gonna collect them?
Perhaps the Bezos couple. They've got billions of dollars.
Right.
What's it to them to spend a couple billion on a really snappy building that's not quite up to date?
Well, that's
anyway. It's available.
Yeah,
if anybody wants
it,
the Chrysler Building. You know what's funny about this article by Gina Belafonte? It starts out how she, a potential boyfriend, asks her what's her favorite building in New York. Yeah. And she's, embarrassed to blurt out to him that it's the Chrysler Building because that's such an unoriginal answer.
Oh.
Well, what kind of people are we that we can't be comfortable with loving something that's
You're letting
beautiful?
Gina Belafonte have it. I don't disagree with you. But now that you mentioned collector's items, I'm going to jump the order here and mention that here's a new kind of collector's item. Vintage cars, those have been collector's items for a long time. But now people are buying or converting vintage cars so that they have electric underpinnings, electric motors.
Well, why not? They're toys anyway.
That's exactly right.
So they might as well plug in.
Well, apparently, you know who did this? Prince Harry and Meghan Markle did this. They electrified a 1968 E-Type Jaguar. And
really?
They're photographed here smiling in their
I don't
new
think it was a Jaguar, Dan. I think it was a Jaguar.
Jaguar. Sorry.
Jaguar.
It's electric. I don't know how you pronounce it. It must be different. So in any event, another type of collectible for those interested. It only adds $80,000 to the car. In other words, you can take your new Jaguar in or your Aston Martin or whatever. And
in value?
No. If you say, I want it to run in an electric system.
The cost of converting it
is $80,000.
Really?
And so they reason, I think, quite correctly.
I think my brothers could pull this off for,
this would be a great business for your brothers.
$65,000.
Your brothers could really do this. And they could do it and probably make $1 zillion.
Bryce, Steed, are you listening?
Yeah. I think it would be fantastic for them. But in any event, it only makes sense, clearly, for a very expensive car. You're not going to bring in You know, a Subaru, it costs you $40,000, and say, let's put $80,000 addition in it, and this way it'll be like a Prius. I mean, we're not going to do it.
How hard can it be? A wire here, a wire there, a junction or two? I don't know.
All right, we're going to get your brothers on that. Let me just mention one final thing about the NFL players before I turn the floor back to you, which I thought was interesting.
Like you're saying final, like it is final?
It is final. There was an article in the Journal which said, I don't know why they thought this was headline news, but they said that former players from the University of Alabama do well in business in Alabama when they graduate because people recognize the name. In particular, the quarterbacks become insurance salesmen. And their name carries a little recognition value, and they do well in insurance. So maybe football helps you in business later on. And I'm saying to myself, that's how football helps you? Well, it turns out with very little digging. I found an article just a year earlier, not in the Journal, in which they listed former star football players, 50 of them, who work on Wall Street, either with venture capitalists or as broker-dealers, or as financial management folks, but a lot of them are, I'm not going to read the 50 names, but I will tell you, you have to take my word for it, Tamsen. There are many, many highly recognizable names in this list.
Right.
And many of them have very big jobs. The one
that's what you just said, that the name recognition is key.
It is. So
it would be the guys with recognizable names.
The one that you know is Scott Bruner, who is here, is now, who was the quarterback of the Giants and lived in Cranberry. And is now with
coached
AXA.
Little League.
And coached Little League.
No, softball, right?
Softball, right.
Softball.
Well, that counts as Little League. But Wayne Corbett, you know, I don't know if you know him. He's a jet receiver. He works at Stifel. Let's see. Brad DeLuiso works at Morgan Stanley. He was the Giants kicker. I don't know. Brent Jones. Tommy Vardell played with the 49ers. They have a private equity firm. Phil McConkey returned kicks for the Giants. Now he runs a broker-dealer. But I'm telling you, we got 50 names here, and I know a name or two that isn't even on the list. I mean, I was doing some research with respect to valuation on teams, and there was one of the valuation firms, which is an economics firm, was called Randy Fataha. And I'm saying, Randy Fataha? He's got this valuation business. He was a big-time receiver for the New England Patriots and Stanford before that. And sure enough, I see some conference he's at, and they're joking, saying, Randy, didn't you play football a million years ago? And he goes, yeah, nobody remembers that. I remember Randy Vitale.
So here's my question.
What's that?
Well, I mean, you know, a lot of these guys you were mentioning are in positions of less impact.
Meaning?
Meaning, I mean, that's great. Some football players go on to these great jobs, but then you have all these other players that end up with brain damage.
Well, you see, but this is my point. I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know how many people end up with brain damage or not. I just don't know. And frankly, neither does the New York Times. So I think none of us know. But at least this is one positive side of it.
But this is not something put out by people who say, football's not that bad.
No.
Okay? People get great jobs after football. They're not all in a wheelchair.
And yet but that point of view might be right. I don't really know. Okay? Mm-hmm. And nobody knows. But all I'm saying is the guys who play football aren't necessarily dumb jocks with no futures. With deteriorating health and so on.
Well, I would never think of that.
Well, some people do, I think. And my point is that there are a lot of very positive traits that are associated with success anywhere, including in football, maybe even especially in football. And those same traits serve these folks well. After they get the education, a lot of them are very smart guys, and they go on to very big things. And they're out of football by the time they're 33, 34, plenty of time to have a career. So you hear the negative story, and I'm not saying there's nothing to that, but I'm saying there's a positive story too. That's all.
Good to know.
Good to know.
But I'm suspicious.
Well, there's nothing. No one's trying to prove a point here. It's just the way it is.
Well, you don't know. You don't know. Yeah. I mean, people have their reasons for releasing stories and crafting stories. Oh. But if these guys are doing well, more power to them. I wish more of those guys were doing well. Anyway, you'll be glad to know several of your favorite museums have new exhibitions coming up about Rembrandt.
Yeah, we haven't heard enough about
Okay,
Rembrandt.
so you know what that means. We got to do the
What?
We got to do the Netherlands bike tour again.
We're not
so
doing
we can
that.
go
We're not-
back to
we're not
these
doing-
museums.
That was a once in a lifetime. Yeah.
Oh, come on. It was flat. It was fabulous.
I didn't say it was bad, but we have other places to go.
I know, but they probably have hills other places. Let's
Yeah,
just go back to what we
we're
know.
looking forward to
Let's
the
get
hills.
good at that. But anyway, in Amsterdam at the Rijksmuseum, love the Rijksmuseum, they are putting on an exhibition called All the Rembrandts. And this will be from February 15th to June 10th. They're getting out everything they have by Rembrandt. Okay, that's paintings, that's drawings, and they say what's interesting is it's some of his drawings really show his amazing talents more clearly.
But wasn't
even
there
in the
wasn't there a
paintings.
Rembrandt drawing exhibit a year or two ago in New York that I heard a lot about?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
At the Morgan?
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay, but anyway, this is everything, and you know that the Rijksmuseum has some very heavy hitters, including Night Watch, etc.
Yes.
Now, they're doing this, they're arranging everything.
For those who don't know, heavy hitters means paintings, but yes.
Important, famous
Yes.
paintings.
It's a heavy hitter.
And Night Watch.
Yeah, right.
Which you remember
I
very
remember it.
well.
It's a
It's
heavy
a
hitter.
biggie. It's
Yeah.
it's the probably the painting that everybody runs to.
You can't-
all tourists run
Could
to.
not fit in the back of your car.
Yeah.
No.
And they've arranged everything thematically, but they haven't moved Night Watch.
You can't
It's
move
too
it.
big.
No kidding.
And so they
How you gonna
just
get it
they
through the
worked around
door?
it. But here's something interesting. They're not gonna ever move it. They're going to conserve it, actually.
Yeah.
It's not really... Night Watch is the nickname for it.
Yeah.
Because it was the painting was so dark. They thought it took place at night. Doesn't really take place at night. They cleaned off some of the old varnish, and it turns out it's a daytime thing.
That's going to be called Day Watch then?
So, but Day Watch.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they're going to do a new conservation, but the way they're going to do it is kind of fun. And this is not, you've seen this in other museums. You've seen it actually, I think at the Brera they had this going on. We were there last.
Possibly so.
They build like a plexiglass container,
Yeah.
and conservators work on the painting right in the museum. And you can watch them working until it's done. So they don't expect huge differences. But there you have that. Rembrandt is Rembrandt. I mean, Rembrandt's name just means great painter, right? You use it like you use Sanka,
Never.
He's
Not at all. No,
He's a Rembrandt.
That's
Yeah,
right.
just means he's a great painter.
That's true.
Okay?
There is that.
And it's interesting that because there was such a rage for Rembrandt at a certain point, actually, the existing number of Rembrandts was as high as 700. I mean, you know how that happens.
How does that happen?
People forge.
Oh, okay.
People sell paintings that look a lot like Rembrandt, and people want to believe it's Rembrandt, and you can get experts say it is. So in the 1920s, worldwide, there, was a count of about 700. That's gone down to about 300. It's back up a little bit, 340. But that's kind of interesting to me that these numbers float around a bit. Meanwhile, there's another exhibition coming to the Maurits House in The Hague. Another one of your favorite museums. That was a fun museum. It's a small
I'm nodding like
museum.
crazy. I'm like a bobblehead. Yeah.
So they have 11 undisputed Rembrandts and a couple others that are questionable, that they're making clear, that there are questions on display. And that's going to be from January 31st to September 15th. So I'm saying to you, out there, our listening public, if you're heading to the Netherlands this spring and summer,
The word Rembrandt will come up. Believe me.
check out Rembrandt.
Yeah.
And there's also an article in the Wall Street Journal talking about Leonardo da Vinci's study of a woman with an ermine, lady with an ermine. And this is an article by Tom Freudenheim, and talking about a rather elegant portrait done around 1489 to 90 that is actually in Krakow.
Poland.
Okay, in Poland, as part of the Czartoryski collection. It actually is being lent to the National Museum at the moment because the other museum is being renovated. Anyway, it's an interesting article stating by Freudenheim, implying that he likes this painting, this portrait, much better than the well-known portrait, Mona Lisa.
I saw that coming, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Mona Lisa, there are a lot of people who believe the only reason it's famous is because it was stolen at a certain point and got a lot of publicity. This is a very nice painting. Actually, even though I'm not a big Mona Lisa person, strikes me as a little bit less interesting than Mona Lisa in terms of visually and artistic technique. But it has kind of an interesting story. It's allegedly of a courtesan, Cecilia Gallerani, who was buddies with Ludovico Sforza. Okay. She had a relationship with him, also known as Il Moro. And she actually, she's lovely. She seems, she looks fairly sophisticated. The thing is, Sforza gets married to Beatrice d'Este, well known as the most beautiful and brilliant woman, princess in Italy at the time. And if you can believe it, Cecilia actually gets pregnant after Sforza and Beatrice are married.
I get where you're going there.
Beatrice writes her a mean note and puts an end to that relationship. So it's an intriguing story. But anyway, why she's holding an ermine, we do not know. There are lots of
the least of it. Who cares?
Lots of interesting stories about ermines, mainly that they don't like to get their coats dirty.
Yeah.
They'd rather die than get mud on their fur.
Quite a few of them do die.
Even Leonardo seems to mention this. So there you have it, a Polish Leonardo.
Yeah. All right. So it's hard to beat a Polish Leonardo. Here's something that's odd, though. A cyclist has tested positive for steroids and been denied a world record.
How is that odd?
Why is that odd? Because the cyclist in question is 90 years old. Carl
You know
Grove.
what? This is the thing. He just didn't get the memo. You know, perhaps he's not into technology. This happens with older people. All the cyclists are doing it. They just didn't tell.
Well, that's not. He
guy.
has an excuse. So he was racing in the 90 to 94-year-old division. And it's a 2,000.
Wait a minute. There's a 90 to 94.
There's a 2,000-meter track and 6 laps
in
of the velodrome.
94 to 100 division?
I want you to let's focus on the numbers. He did the 2,000 meters in 3 minutes, and it's hard really to think about that. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's pretty fast. Then they tested him for steroids the next day, and he's found that he had a prohibited steroid. And this is where the intrigue starts. First of all, the thought begins, why would he be taking steroids? Because he has no competition. In other words, you were correct. No one's racing him in the 90-94 division, so it seems like you wouldn't extend yourself in that way. And number two is, he claimed, as many people do, he didn't take a prohibited steroid. It was because of some tainted meat he ate the night before. Apparently, this is what you say when they catch you with steroids.
Tainted meat?
Tainted meat. But in his case, they believe it. He had a piece of liver the night before. Talking about giving liver a bad name. They said, oh, yeah, that can happen with liver. And not only did they restore...
So somebody gave the cow steroids?
Tamsen, all this is fantasy. The point is, somebody just said, something, the guy's 90, forget it.
Cut the man a break?
Yeah, so we're not taking away the win, and we're not taking away the world record. And he's not returning phone calls. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. But it does.
I think now we know. Now we know. A few more years, we can start taking steroids and win all the games.
Look, there's a question of what you can really tell from these blood traits. And in a different type of story in that connection, the latest thing in the NBA is marketing by an Irish company called Oreco, which claims that if they do regular analysis of players' blood, NBA players, basketball players' blood, like several times a week, they can provide valuable information as to their health, in particular, whether they're fatigued or not, whether they're liable to catch a disease or something like that, whether they need a certain type of training or their immune system is down. And two teams have bought into it. One is the Dallas team, the Dallas Maverick team, which is doing extremely well. And by the way, it's voluntary. Not every player has to do it. But one or two of the players who are using it say it's been tremendously helpful to them. For the young folks who have trouble playing this long a season for the first time in their lives, it tells them when they have to step back. There's one older player in particular who's having the best season of his career, Jose Barea, and he says this is a marvelous thing. He said at one point they tested him as being vulnerable, and he kind of got hurt the next day. Now he dials it back, pays attention to the blood results. So this would be quite persuasive, except for the fact that the other team using this is the Knicks. And the Knicks are in the toilet, as we like to say in the blood testing business. So that's not the endorsement they're looking for. But Mark Cuban, by the way, owns the Dallas Mavericks. And Mark Cuban says he pays $150,000 for this service, and it's worth every penny.
Really?
Yeah. So
that's peanuts to him.
It is peanuts to him. And some people think he's a smart guy, and some people not so much. But anyway, it's something to look for. And then here's something which I guess every once in a while people ask this question, and now the Journal's asking this question. What's up with those guys who don't wear coats in the wintertime? We all know someone, and you and I have someone in mind, we can mention his name or not, who walks around in the wintertime and makes a point of not wearing a coat. As a matter of fact, if you walk around New York City or some highly populated place, you'll see guys in the dead of winter wearing shorts. Maybe a hoodie, but shorts. And so the Wall Street Journal decides to figure out what's going on.
Well, you know what's going on. They're just stupid.
Well,
how is that difficult to figure out?
Well, it turns out that you could have saved the Wall Street Journal a lot of time and money, because that is the answer. They did a bunch of interviews, and here's what they made this as scientific as they could. They said, number one, comfort was a main factor. This may seem weird, but some people say that they find warm coats uncomfortable. This is highly scientific, all right?
Some people say.
Unscientific, yeah. Well, that's the way a lot of articles in the paper get written. Some people say, believe me, the majority. Others say that mobility is limited in coats, right? Mobility is a problem. And others say that they don't think outerwear, here's a quote, I don't think outerwear is the most flattering of shapes on most people. You look bulky in it, says Michael Kernish, 25, a software consultant.
So they're too vain?
And
they're
finally,
too vain to stay warm?
Finally, the final reason given was, this is from a fellow named Leon Mayer, a 31-year-old real estate investor, which means I guess he's unemployed, that he said, I've become a creature of habit. And I like to wear the same thing every day. And, you know, I can't be bothered with putting on long pants. I wear shorts, comfortable most of the time, so it's a little rough during a couple months of the year. But
I don't think he gets out much, to be honest.
Yeah. So I think you kind of put your finger on it. You jumped the gun on this, but I think you're right. And the Journal wouldn't say this, but you know, they're just stupid. I think that's probably all you can say. It's a wide world, and a lot of people don't do a lot of heavy thinking when it comes to choosing their outerwear. That's all we can say. And finally, this is the story that no one else could possibly have an interest in this story except for us. There's a story about the progenitor of Tamsen and Dan read the paper. It's a couple, Mary Kay and John Stearns, which is written about because Mary Kay Stearns passed away at the age of 93, who had the early version, from some way of speaking, of Tamsen and Dan read the paper.
Daniel's nothing like that.
It's
more like I Love Lucy or something.
It's true. It is a little bit. But let's explain. People can draw their own conclusions. The point is that Mary Kay Stearns and John Stearns,
in the infancy of television.
That's right. They came up with a broadcast television show in 1948 that ran for 2 years on the Dumont Network, a network that no one listening to this has ever heard of. But as a matter of fact, it was a time when Dumont not only was a network, but they made the TVs to watch the show on. I can tell you that from what I've heard. And the show, there are rumors, 15 to 30 minutes long, but they basically, this is the way the Times explains it. It told gently humorous tales of the fictional Johnny, a banker, and Mary Kay, a homemaker, and Mrs. Stearns, who wrote the episodes, often drew from the couple's lives for inspiration.
And people believed it. They have notes in there that people, they would send
that's exactly
things
right.
to them to solve problems in their lives.
Here's a quote, Mrs. Stearns.
Get well cards,
that's
etc.
Right. We got a tremendous amount of mail, Mrs. Stearns said, because people had never seen a husband and wife in real life doing skits that were based on what really happened in our marriage. So people became tremendously identified with us as people. They were a sensation in 1949 and 50, before television had caught on. See, there are two things that they have in common with us. One is that they were putting out a product that no one who would be their likely audience could possibly receive, because no one had a TV set in 1940, 1950. Right. So they had it, and even if they got a half share, that was 185 people. That was all they were going to have, and no one was recording it. So that was a limiting factor. And the second was, and here's the quote, it was television by the seat of the pants, which I think also is something they have in common with us. This is sort of podcasting by the seat of our pants. So there's that. But in any event, they seem
what I thought was interesting was they mentioned that they actually showed the couple in bed together.
Oh, what?
Now know
we're not doing that.
That was outlawed by the TV censors. Yeah. You remember you would always see Lucy and Ricky in twin beds, and I just as a kid thought that was weird.
Did you?
Yeah. Oh, because
you were precocious. There's no question about it. What were you rooting for here?
And then later I found out, that it was I think considered racy to have two people in the same bed. I thought it was normal.
I think Fred and Ethel had a double bed as opposed to
Lucy
and Ricky.
You're making that up.
I am making it up. You're right.
Yeah, but no one ever got into Fred and Ethel's apartment.
That's true.
But anyway, their
show,
the street. their show got a little bit of popularity, and then the network,
the Stearns were talking about,
the network decided we'll get real writers.
Yeah.
And once they had real writers, the Stearns didn't really like the copy.
Yeah.
And bowed out. That's the story they give. Anyway.
That's I put my foot down here. Many offers for real writers have come our way, and we've said no. We don't want real writers. We're doing it by the seat of our pants, as we have done it tonight. So until next time.
This is Tamsen Granger.
And Dan Abuhoff.
With Tamsen and Dan read the paper. See you next week.